Well, Dan Lanning is certainly pretty torrid on the recruiting trail at this point. Top 10 class, number 8, according to the 247 Sports rankings, 18 hard commits, meaning he's got probably 3/4 of his class in the door at this point in regards to commits, and a couple of recent ones coming in just here in the last few days. Your thoughts about the Oregon recruiting efforts?
Outstanding. I mean, simply put, they are outstanding, but there's still a long way to go. I think to this point they've done about as well as you could expect them to, but I don't suspect that this is a class that is anywhere close to a finished product. I don't think they have their highest rated recruit yet. They don't have a 5-star yet. This is a class that can still go up, but frankly, it can still go down. I mean, it's a recruiting class that sits number 8 nationally in the 24/7 Sports rankings, as you said. But that's a list of teams that's got schools like LSU on their tail, Tennessee on their tail, Alabama out of the mix for a top 10 class at this point in time, Texas, both because they just haven't picked up the volume of recruits yet. So you expect that to change. And I think when you look at where Oregon is going on the recruiting trail, it's a really, really good place, Mark. And I think Lanning has shown that he's capable of recruiting at a high level, top 10 class, factoring in both high school and portal a season ago. I think that's an expectation now for the Ducks, given that that's what he did in year 1. You should be able to continue to build on that. Looks like they're doing it. And I think the question for the Ducks is, can they get a top 5 class? Can they have the best class in program history according to the total composite rankings or average player rating on the 24/7 Sports measures there? So that's kind of what I'm looking for is, who's next, right? Like everything to this point, it's been good. I see guys who can be Power 5 starters, who could be a starting quarterback one day, who could be regular contributors. I think this class has several of those guys. It's hard to know which guys exactly, especially in the portal era, but I think they've done a good job, but there's still a lot more work to be done. Mostly they need to land some 5-star kids who, could make a big impact for 2024 as true freshmen.
So, Spencer, you mentioned that Dan Lanning is capable of recruiting with some of the best in the country. He's also proven capable of going just about anywhere. The most recent commit is DeJuan Riggs, the running back out of the DMV, so going all the way across country for him. And so this isn't just been relegated to, the Great Northwest, even the Southwest, even California. But Jaquan McRoy, he is the previous latest commit, the first day of July, offensive tackle, a top 175 prospect, top 10 to 12 at his position, coming from the state of Alabama.
Yeah, I love the geographical diversity that they've got here. And I think if you're going to recruit a high level, you have to have that, especially when you're in the state of Oregon, right? And that's where you're located because, Oregon high school football, there are some good players. It's fun. It's competitive. I remember watching it. I did play-by-play for it and saw some good players come through there. Alex Forsyth was at West Linn while I was calling games for Lake Oswego, as a matter of fact, back in my Laker broadcasting days. But those sorts of guys are not super common, right? There just aren't that many of them. So your biggest and best recruits are almost always going to come out of state. The last 5-star that committed, they came out of the state of Oregon even, just anywhere, was Thomas Tyner. And he ended up playing for the Ducks, medically retiring, going back to the Bees. And he was every bit a 5-star recruit. He was super, super talented. But you just don't see guys like that very often. There just aren't that many people there, right? And it's not as big of a culture. It's not as big of a cultural feat or component as it is in, say, Texas. So you just don't have that, kind of commitment and grind of, let's, build our kids into being 4- and 5-star players. You get some, but you don't get very many. So I think that's, part of what makes it all the more impressive for Dan Lanning is that he has to recruit elsewhere first and then be able to recruit Oregon. But I think it's, kind of the chicken or the egg problem. Do you recruit your own state well first and then you're able to get the other kids? I think it's probably more of when you're able to pull the caliber of players that Oregon is and win at the level that they have, the in-state kids are going to come a lot more easily. The ones that are, worthwhile having and such. They also just had a 5-star kicker come from West Linn High School, same high school as Alex Forsyth, who was a starting center for the last 4 or 5 years or so for the Ducks. So I think that's a good place for Oregon to be. I think their approach is good. It's consistent. It's productive. It's successful on the recruiting trail. but they have got to, now go out and kind of get some of these 5-star kids, the Elijah Rushings, the Justin Williams, the Brandon Bakers of the world. Those are the names that you need to see start falling Oregon's way. I think not only to just solidify their class in the top 10, but also to help them maybe get towards the top 5.
And based on your intel, Spencer, are they in a good position to grab their share of those high-end guys? Are the leans going their way, does it appear?
Yeah, I mean, people I talk to who are connected in the recruiting industry tell me that, there are going to be 5-stars that commit. I think that's a baseline expectation. It's not an if, it's a how many. How many 5-stars will you get? And I think that Baker is a guy, number 1 offensive tackle, they're capable of getting, but that's going to be a tough recruitment. Elijah Rushing commits on July 6th. That's one where Oregon feels like they've been in a good spot for quite some time, but it's not a lock. Justin Williams is a 5-star linebacker. That's a guy who Oregon, again, has been tied to on several occasions, but that's not a lock, and I think his timeline is a little bit more drawn out, and that's the other thing with some of these kids, the other 5-stars that they're kind of looking at, the David Stones, the Williams Nwaneris. I don't think they're really in on Colin Simmons, but when you look at those sorts of players, Nwaneri is the number 1 defensive lineman. He's from the state of Missouri, which is where Dan Lanning is actually from originally. He's a St. Louis guy. Those are the sorts of names that I'm really watching heavily over the next several weeks leading into fall camp as they look to round out, this recruiting class. Because, during the season, Mark, you don't get that many commits. So you can get a couple, like some kids will, but 80+% of your class is probably going to be filled out before the first snap of this season, right? That's why we're able to talk about this stuff and understand the importance and seriousness of all of it is there's not that much time left to do this. Now, you will have kids, right? Even some big-time players who won't take visits until the fall, won't be deciding until National Signing Day, might not decide until February and stuff. You will have some of that, but you mentioned it. There's already 18 hard commits in this class. I don't think you're going to see Oregon go over 25, 26, maybe. I think that's kind of the sweet spot nowadays. Like going over 30, that seems unlikely. So I think you're well over halfway done in terms of racking up commitments if you're the Ducks. Some of those kids might have to continue being recruited, like Fox Crater, for instance, has taken visits since he verbally committed to Oregon, and he was seen as kind of like a riser in the recruiting ranks, and Oregon's been able to keep him committed at this point in time. You're going to have those sorts of situations, right? Whether that's kids who are currently committed or who are going to commit. Other schools are not going to just ignore them because, we see flips happen all the time. It's not going to be more than, a couple players in your class, but could be an impactful couple players depending on who it is. So, Oregon's got to keep their foot on the gas right now because they're not the only team having recruiting success in college football.